Okay, what should we start with? So probably we should have a review. We could, if you want, not being paid for it, but I'm always doing it and happy to continue doing it. And I mean, I'm trying to say don't feel obligated, so want to do it if you guys want to. And about time, I think that I have the weekend kind of open, so I can shift things. In terms of timing, usually I like to leave like 30 to 2 days, roughly, to between the review and the final, which is, don't take my word, but I believe that the final is Monday. So, which suggests to do it on a Saturday evening, but people, for various reasons, prefer, maybe don't like to do it on this time. You can do it on Sunday. Yeah. But, so let's see first. If we are doing it, it's Saturday, 5 p.m. Is this good for everybody? Good for everybody? Okay. And if I'll be available pieces of Sunday. Oh, yeah.
Would the review session be recorded?
Why not? Yes, I mean, yeah, it's over Zoom. And, sure. So, just to make sure. Let me, Robert, sound check. Yeah, of course, but like I'll be available to answer questions Sunday also. But if you want a more organized review, then it's better. And I don't care about Saturday or Sunday. I'll let you decide. That's two times that I think that are optimal. So, assume tentatively Saturday, 5 p.m. Like, it should be sometime that, yeah, I'll have office hours, and I'm always, you drop me an email, and usually I'm pretty good in responding in the next half an hour or so, even if it's not office hours. Yeah, the optimal time for the review is like after you made the pass yourself, but you still have the questions. Plan for today is to speak about more modeling, and before that to go about what I remember right now about the material, plus a few emphasize that we are not, we diverge from the formal syllabus, so maybe it was mentioning it before. So if you go to the Google Doc, You don't see it here, but it says material for the final starts here, which includes ray tracing that we also covered in the midterm. Things before ray tracing, you don't need to worry. Tone, the tone, the composition, convolution, not in the material for the final. Ray tracing, what we had there, the standard ray tracing, here is a vector, what object do you hit first, etc. That was before it. But then we saw a bunch of application about distributed ray tracing. We can, how are we handling second reflection? How are we handling light that comes to this wall but reflecting from that wall? Right? That's all the things that we didn't cover for the midterm, which we shoot a ray from the eye. The ray happens to hit the floor underneath the chair. How much light is falling underneath the chair? Because the chair doesn't see any of the immediate light directly, not the lower part of the chair. So you need to shoot rays to the walls and so on. And we discussed, not in great details, but we discussed how do I shoot not ridiculous number of rays, nor do I not let the exponential growth, the depth goes too far, because rays from underneath the floor needs to now be shot towards the walls around you, which in turn you'll see how much they are illuminated, and then you'll see how much you can do, how much the third order ray. So it's like 3-4 calls of the recursion, and we didn't even start talking about mirrors and reflecting objects. So all of it you can use distributed ray tracing, where the big idea was that one ray is not enough. I need to shoot a few rays per pixel, for example, for one pixel, single pixel. I need to shoot several rays, and we started by, let's put a grid of points inside the pixel and shoot multiple rays, because the pixel might see light coming from different directions. And then we said, yeah, but putting these rays, these sub-rays, completely along the grid expose us to all the issues that we saw earlier with sampling in frequencies that are not nice for us. What are we doing in algorithms when we don't know what to do? We toss coins. That works for us for hashing. It works for whomever knows about skip list, works in quicksort, and works here as well. You don't know what to do? Toss coins, allowed randomness. Use a rand variable in your computer where you will say, for every ray, I'll shift it by some random amount. Either pick 9 pixels inside, well, 9 rays inside the pixel, or constrain them to still cover the pixel. That is, I'll first divide the pixel into a grid, and then inside every grid, I let some perturbation, multiple variants. Now, if we have a good ray tracing, and we want to find how much light, let's say in the scene like here, you have the part underneath the chair, and let's, for simplicity, assume that underneath the chair, you don't see any of the light on the top. Can you take advantage of a Z buffer that happens to be installed in your computer? Do you have GPUs on your computer? You still want to do ray tracing, because otherwise various specular effects will not look that great. So how would the GPU help you? And there are multiple answers, but I leave it to you to meditate on various answers. But one obvious one was, if I'm a point on the wall, and I want to know how much light falls on me, I need to ask, which of the lights do I see? Which of the parts of the wall do I see? Make sense? So it suggests, we talked about it in more details, how by faking colors of objects or the shadow mapping, we can get already a hint not to generate the file, to use one pass of the Z buffer, for example, one pass of your fragment programming, just to decide who sees whom and at which point of it. Underneath the chair, I see some of the walls if I'll hide underneath the chair, but definitely not every point on the walls. I see just specific points, so I can limit my ray tracing to only points that I guarantee to seize, or objects that I guarantee to seize. Because otherwise, ray tracing is a very, very, very slow business. Okay. Distributed ray tracing, we also had some applications like the propeller of the airplane that we created motion by supercompose a few images. When the propeller moves a bit, the pool ball that was moving, and we wanted to create the feeling of motion. So, yeah. Go over it. Okay. Various ray tracing, Phong simplification of, or simulation of specular shading. Right. Specular shading is the Phong exponent, takes the direction to the viewer, takes the direction to the eye, takes the angle between them, and look at cosine, this angle to the power of the Phong exponent. It doesn't really capture the physical phenomena that is specular shading, but it's a good simulation, or good, it creates a nice visual effect that looks more or less like the specular shadow. So, but it is a simulation. And remember that we have two Phong in this course. We have the Phong simulation. Let's just call it a Phong shading, which is a shorthand of the Phong simulation of specular shading. And of course, we have the diffuse shading, and we need ray tracing for all of them. Don't forget Snell law. You saw Snell in two ways. You saw Snell first as a formula of that for which I know by how much array. Even if you don't submit homework 6, please make sure that you know how to implement Snell, because it's in the material, or the official name was a refraction. Refraction, I believe. And it doesn't hurt to say, now you have cheat sheet. None of it is something that you need to remember by heart. But if you remember when we discussed homework 6, I mentioned that if I have my ray, there is my pool, that's a surface of water, and from the floor of the pool, there is a blue pixel, or a blue texture over here, which caused a light of ray to emerge from the pool. So far, it's still in the water. And then when it hits the surface of the water, depending on what the normal to the surface, because we can have wave, this ray R1 is changing its direction doesn't look like it changed its direction, so let me make it a bit unrealistic. That's R2, so the way of light changes its direction dynamically way too much, and Snell law tells you some relationship between these two angles to the normal, but computing sinus and arc sinus was very tedious, so I gave you a formula that does it by just dot product of normals square and square root, and of course the medium coefficients. So good things to remember it. The triangular mesh, we didn't speak too much. You need to know basically what it is. There is a part of the data structure that I didn't tell you. Find a good time that every vertex needs to remember something from one of the edges that leaves it. That was part of the data structure that you didn't need for homework 5. But a vertex in the triangular mesh needs to know about, might be adjacent to multiple triangles. So the same vertex V needs to be adjacent, or either might be adjacent to T1, T2, T3, T4, T5. And then there is a data structure that you do know that there is an array of the vertices and arrays of the edges where every edge remembers just the two indices of the vertices it connects. So vertex is a very long piece of data, contains X, Y, Z, contains color, auxiliary data, reflection, and so on. Edge is a very small piece of data, just two indices, namely 2 pointers into the array of the vertices. And by the way, if you'll ever use it for you'll ever use meshes for other applications, the same data structure usually also contains for every vertex. What do you think a vertex should know, should remember? It's adjacent to a lot of triangles. So what should this vertex know? Yeah, so a vertex knows, of course, all the X, Y, Z, color, reflectivity, RGB with respect to specular, RGB with respect to diffuse, of course. But what else? How should it refer to all the triangles that it has around it? Right. Let's say that if I'll ask you what are all the triangles or all the edges that this vertex belongs to. So one option is that, remember, there is an array of the edges. I saw that. There is an array of the edges, and in the array of the edges, it said that vertex V17 and V20 are connected. So I have 17 and 20 as an entry in one of the edges, and V17 and V30 are also connected. So 17 and 30 is another entry in the array of the edges. But if I want to find all the triangles that are connected to this vertex, or all the edges that connect to this vertex, I need to go over the array of edges without one more data structure. I need to go over the list of edges and ask for each and every edge, hey, is V17 participates in this edge or not? So very tedious linear work, even though there are only 6, 7 triangles connected to it. Everybody understands the need to another data structure? Why, if I want to ask who are all the triangles that V17 participates in, it's not very convenient to just go to the area of edges and check for every edge 70 yes or no. So other alternative is V17 will remember all the vertices adjacent to it, which is also not very convenient because of redundancy of information. If it knows all the vertices adjacent to it, there is lots of such vertices, and I don't, yeah.
We do faces.
We can have array of triangles. For every triangle, what are the 3 vertices? And what V17 needs to know is just about one of the triangles or one of the edges. It needs to know about one of the edges that leaves it. Again, V17 knows about one of the edges that leaves it. V17 needs to know only about one of the edges, say the one that connects it to V30. And how can I find the other edges? I can ask from V30, let's ask which triangle this edge is adjacent to. Let's find the other edges of this triangle. One of them will bring us back to V17, and every edge needs to know who are the 2 triangles. Another thing that we didn't mention, every edge just needs to know who are the 2 triangles that is adjacent to this edge. Make sense? So if this edge will tell you T1 is adjacent to me, and I'll find the other 2 edges of T1, in one of them V17 participates, and ask, hey, edge, I know that T1 is one of your 2 triangles adjacent to you. What is the other one? It will say that's T6. And I'll go to T6 and ask what are the other edges, find this edge, and so on. So it was not that exciting, but just if you use it, remember that there is a very simple part that makes the triangular mesh not that exciting. I will not say it as a highlight of the course, but yeah, it makes it simpler. But we did speak about part of this data structure, namely why is this so crucial that a vertex might participate in many edges, and vertex contains a lot of data. How many times? So V17 participates in a lot of triangles, a lot of edges. How is every edge knows about the location of V17 XYZ, the color of V17 XYZ? Absolutely not. The edge only tells me V17, the 17 over here, the index is the vertex adjacent to me. And then I'm going to a different array, the array of the vertices, at which all the information associated with the vertex is all stored once. Moving it on. Matrix math, of course, obvious. Linear algebra of what we covered in the course. Everybody needs to know that what happened when you multiply 2 matrices, Y rotation matrix, how do I get the inverse of the rotation matrix? R minus 1. Talked about it, is also RT. You all need to know why is this true, because we talked a lot about changing coordinate system. RT, you think about the matrix as R as it contains 3 columns. Take these columns, make it rows. And now you can prove that if you take this matrix by R transpose this matrix, then this vector times this vector must be 1, and this vector times another vector will be 0. They are orthogonal to each other. that was why we made sure that all the coordinate systems are right-handed. So, and that was used multiple times when you wanted to render something to the screen, like something that is rotated, like you just rotated the whole world, put the new thing, and rotated it back. Transformation of coordinate systems, obviously. Out of what other things do I expect all of you to know about the matrix, about the matrices we had? Why do we need homogeneous coordinates? We saw multiple applications, starting by translation. Couldn't do translation by matrix multiplication. But then on top of it, we used it for the help. It was not easy to digest material, and I showed you a GeoGebra app and gave you a long speech about it. But there was one thing that was much easier to understand, and that you should all feel very convenient with, and that also needs homogeneous coordinates. If you want to apply matrix multiplication, yeah. Why do we need, what was the application in the course? Homogeneous homogeneous coordinate systems.
Do you mean
So,
apart from translation?
apart from translation. You didn't have any homework that used it directly. You did have a homework that definitely used it.
We definitely used it for rotation, like around the axis.
We kept all the data. I mean, I mostly agree, but for if we only need to rotate, we could have kept everything in Cartesian coordinates. 3 numbers per a point in 3D. But then we wanted to keep it in 4D because of, started from translation plus something else.
The projections?
Which one?
The ortho.
So the part that everybody needs to remember, because that was very easy, how do I get from a point X, Y, Z that lives in 3D? Here is my eye. Here is a camera plane. I know what is the distance from my eye D to the camera plane. I want to know which pixel should I paint in purple because this object is purple. So this pixel should be purple as well. How do I compute the coordinates of this pixel? I know what is a Z value, Z. What is a Z value? Because I know where I decided to place the image plane. How do I compute, say, call this one Y and call this one Y prime? How do I compute Y prime? It's 8th grade geometry. Yeah, congruent triangles, right? This divided by this equal this divided by this. Very legit question for the exam is, how do I express this transformation as a matrix multiplication? How do I compute x prime from x as a matrix multiplication, which, as far as I know, you cannot do without homogeneous coordinates, but is trivial to do with. So Yeah, remind yourself. We had, and at this point, I taught much more than the original syllabus of the course. We had a lot of application of texture mapping, and we had, we saw how to create shadows, we saw how to create specular effect, all by taking one scan from, say, the sun, what object do I see, and then I can make it into a texture that will help me figure out for every pixel illuminated or not. If you don't remember how it goes, we spend a lot of time on it. How every pixel can decide for itself by using texture. Yeah?
Will the panel fun like coding this stuff, or will it just be more conceptual?
God, no, I'm not going to grade. Then I have to read it. No. No. Conceptual, same thing like you have on Piazza. I send you a link of last year exam, so that somebody here might get it anyhow. So it's much better that all of you have it. And the material was not identical, but it's similar. So some of the questions you shouldn't find too hard. And I'll have one question that I added about curves. And I'll give you more questions as I'll think about them. So texture mapping, lot of time. Go over the videos. Graphical pipeline, of course, everything about the Z buffer. Painter algorithm, also. Z buffer, you have a set of triangles. You have two arrays. What is the depth of every pixel? What is the color store of every pixel? A new triangle appears. It affects some of the pixels, but they all together make a decision. Hey, this new object is closer or further away than what I had so far. Of course, in general, and I do assume here that all the objects are opaque. So once an object appears, and is closer to the viewer than what it was before, then I'll change its color. We didn't played with semi-transparency. Accelerating structures. Quad tree, spend a lot of time, much deeper than the original syllabus. R trees, KD trees. How do I use these structures when I want to do a painter algorithm? Objects that are further away, objects that are nearest to me. Which one do I render first? In the case of the texture mapping, let me even add it. We talked about a tree. How do I create a set of imposers from the tree so I don't have to render each leaf independently? We essentially wanted to pick a bunch of objects, if here is my tree, that's how tree looks in my world. Here is my tree, and I wanted to find a plane that meets many components of the tree that are either on this plane or close to the plane. In this case, put them on this plane and remove them, making every other pixel transparent. Why did I insisted on making it with respect to this plane? Because a plane is cool that one piece of the tree will not hide another piece of the tree if they are both appearing on this plane. But we had this nice demo with pieces of the tree. Once I find the first plane, I can remove from the tree all these objects and now find another plane in the same tree again. What would be the next plane? Another plane that meets among all the possible planes. Find the one that hits as many objects as you can. Level of details, we made it with respect to the quad trees. We made it with respect to the texture mapping, what are the images that I stored. We made it with respect to the triangular mesh. In all these cases, we said, I have an object which I know with a lot of details. That's a person or the Stanford teacup that I know with lots of details, and it has n triangles, and n is very large, but I'll keep all the data in case that I need to render this person and I'm very close to this person. What should I do if I'm much further away from this person? Then I would prefer to have a data structure that only stores much fewer details. Let's say, in the example that we saw for the Stanford bunny, it was much less than half, let's call it, say, half the level of details. And then I'll have another level that has n/4, and maybe another level all the way up to one triangle. In real time, I'll see how close I am to the Stanford bunny, and then I'll decide which of the objects will I use, depending on the errors that you are tolerating, and depending on how far or close you are to this object and how critical it is for the general scene. Why do I list this level of details as 1 plus half plus 1/4, etc.? That's because if we are asking, hey, I'm spending memory on storing all these different models, why don't I store only these ones? And the answer is, it expedites the rendering time dramatically. Far away, don't bother with so many details, take much fewer details. And the overhead in the memory is quite neglectable, because what you're spending altogether, that's the only formula of this type, would be the same number of triangles times 1 that you're using for storing the full model, plus 1/2 of n that you're storing for the lower resolution, plus n divided by 4 for the smaller resolution, plus 1/8, plus, and even if I go all the way to infinity with these summations, this overhead is only 2. So I, at most, double my memory, but in return got a huge expediting the rendering time. Everybody's good with this? Instead of storing only the high level, where you pay n times 1, you're paying at most n times 1 plus half plus quarter plus. But if you look at the sum, it is n/4. It is 2, exactly. Yeah, graphical, yeah. No coding, said, don't forget the hash value. With respect to it, we also discussed the painter algorithm. We also discussed lexicographic sorting of triangles. What I first render, the one further away from the viewer, then the one closer to you. How do I use? Yeah. We spoke a bit about rendering large scene. We didn't discuss too many details. We just said, hey, I have such a big scene that I cannot fit all of it into my memory. Oh, so that I, even with my GPU, it takes quite a while to render this scene. So there is a lot of tricks that I can do to know what does the viewer see. Like, take this whole house with all its details and replace it by just its bounding box, and render the whole house and render the whole scene, but replace the house by the bounding box. If the viewer doesn't see this bounding box, no reasons to render this house at all. Remember what I'm talking about? He said, do one pass of it. Of course, use your accelerating data structure, KD3 or any other BSP. And yeah, OK. ICP we didn't speak about. It comes in the context of stitching two images or multiple images of same thing. NERF, beautiful topic. I spent quite some time hoping to get today to NERF. We didn't, but YouTube for it. NERF and edge geometry, otherwise you'll get the NERF guns. It's an area that came up in the last 3-4 years, mostly. The highlight is take a few images, not too many, just a few images of the scene over here, and now let your neural network meditate only on these few images. And what the neural network actually asks from these few images is for some regions of the volume, either somebody over here or not. Either somebody in this point or not. And then this neural network just train itself. You now ask the neural network, hey, I have the original image when my camera was here. What do you generate? Generate by now apply everything that you know from geometry, from our course about generating the scene by, say, standard ray tracing on this volume that your neural network studied. You're not doing anything like the full 3D. You're just trying from the neural network to report, there is somebody in here or not, and if yes, which color it is. And the color might be different depending on the viewer because the color might have specular effect. And you take just a very few images. You are getting some model that is in the 3-5 megabytes versus a geometric scene that had you use triangular mesh, anything standard, you'll talk about quite a few gigabytes. And now you let your neural network meditate on it for a few days. That's a bad part, very, very slow. But once you did it, put the eye over here and ask, hey, eye, what do you see? Based on this model. And based on just a standard ray tracing that we talked today, but the guess about occupied or not occupied is what your neural network just studied. And just from a few images. And the results are fantastic. Absolutely amazing. So I'll share with you some lectures that I heard that was very impressive. OK. Back to surfaces. Let's see what we can squeeze from the rest of today, if there are no questions. Curves and surfaces. A few things that I didn't cover very well. Hermit, what is the input to Hermit? You want to give to the Hermit the direction where you start, the direction where you end. All you see here is one segment of the Hermit. The Hermit will consist of several segments. The Hermit spline will consist of several segments. One goes from A to B, one goes from B to C, and one, etc. C to D, and my input will be what is the velocity VA, what is the velocity VB. Okay, and your weight functions just gives weight to each one of these values. A bit strange to control the curve in this way, but it's fine. And I can definitely ask you why. What do I expect each one of these functions to be equal to 0, and why do I insist on it? Or something that will ask, did you understand how I build these functions? And Now, everything that happens is just a linear combination, not convex combination, but linear combination of these 4 vectors properties. Take where you started, A, where you ended, B. These 2 vectors give weight to each one of them and sum them up. And of course, this function changes with time because as time progressed, I'm moving from A to B, from 0 to 1. That's, we did cover quite well. Even a Bezier curve. So Bezier curve you can define in a few ways. You can define it as take a segment, chop it in ratio t and 1 minus t, or you can give the polynomials. But let's talk about the main differences between Bezier versus Hermite. So in some sense, it's the same animal with just very few technicalities. Connecting them, if you want to play with this. Like here is my 4. Here are the Hermite curve that I generated for this curve, which I'll send you a link to this guy. Here are the weight functions. And now I want to switch to Bezier instead of curves. So Bezier needs almost the same parameters. It needs the starting and end point. And it needs to control not vectors, not the vector VA, but just 2 other points. Let's call them A prime. That in my first attempt would be to put A prime just at the end of the vector VA, and B prime and the other parameters that the Bezier needs would be just at the end of VB. And I like to show Bezier. The weight functions are a bit different. Weight functions are a bit different. And they take these 4 points, and you are generating this green curve that has the same starting orientation. It also starts at A, also ends at B. Okay. And it looks very similar to the Hermite curve of these 4 points, but not quite. Here is a Bezier of these 4 points, while the Hermite was this much shorter things. So to make it completely equivalent, instead of A prime, I'll split this segment in ratio of 1/3 to 1/3, put this point A double prime over here. That is, instead of A prime, I'll just go from A only 1/3 of the distance. And this will be one of my control points. B prime would be my other control point. And then I'm getting exactly the Bezier. So in this aspect, they are the same creature. What's exciting about, well, both polynomials, they're really, really smooth. And when they meet at an endpoint, they are meeting each other very nicely. It's continuous. The velocity is the same. If I'll add another segment, let's talk about the convex hull. Show me hands. How many of you don't know what is a convex hull of a set of points? Very good. Hard. So the hand wave explanation says, here are my points. I'll put a rubber band around all these points. I will replace every point by a nail sticking up, cannot move, and then I let loose of my rubber band, and it will snag itself until it is taut, and when it's taut, it creates a polygon, and this polygon is convex. And the vertices of this polygon are taken from the original set of points that I started from, except that there could be points that are not on the convex hull. Quick example. Convex hull of these 4 points. Convex hull of these 4 points would be this creature. Only 3 vertices. The 4th point is not counted. So that was one way to create this convex hull, by putting in rubber band and imagining it snag. Another way to create the convex hull is to look at the points P1, P2, P3, P4. Here are my 4 or more points. Give a weight W1, W2, W3, W4 to all these points, and have the weights Wi be a convex combination. We discussed convex combinations multiple times in this course. I will feel more than pleasant asking you what it means. Quick definition, all the Wi's are positive, and the sum of the Wi's is exactly 1. Why am I telling you all of it at this point of the course? Because it's very relevant to the Bezier. It's one of the nice properties of Bezier. Look at these 4 points that define the Bezier, and look at the convex hull, period, the convex hull of these 4 points. As we said, the convex hull might have, it starts from 4 points, so it has at most 4 vertices, but I can definitely take one of these vertices and put it somewhere inside, and then the convex hull has only 2, and if you try hard enough, you can make it collapse to a segment and then to a point. But at most, it has 4 vertices. What's cool about the weights that define the Bezier? These 4 points remember, in Bezier, I don't sum vectors and points. I only sum points. So, I only sum the points A prime, B prime, and give weights at every time to each one of them. Let's fix some time, t. Fix some time, t. As opposed to Hermite, all these functions are positive. All these functions, between 0 and t equal 1, I don't care otherwise, they're all positive. What are they sum up to? They always sum up to 1. Why am I telling you all of it? To convince you that the Bezier curve always lies inside the convex hull of the 4 points that defines it. So some people find it very natural to control Bezier spline. Bezier spline is just stitch Bezier curves one after the other. Okay, so every segment will live in its own convex hull. It's easy to imagine what it's going to do. Okay. So, and of course, you can see both, and then good luck understanding. Okay, Hermite, 2 vectors and 2 points. Bezier, 4 points. And easy to, yeah?
Is it
I was scratching my head with the very same question, because while it's not only, it's not convex combination. One of this function is definitely negative. So I'm scratching myself, and I think that I convinced myself that it can go out. But I'll be happy to, but yeah, that's not the part. So how do we control curve in general? Well, we can do B-spline that we discussed last time. It might stuck, it might work and it might not. It I did something that upsets. So this is the, but you see here is a cat hull, cat hull Rom spline. What happened with this spline? So what you see in this spline, the cat hull Rom spline, is that I gave only the control points, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. These are the control points. And I don't really want to compute tangents at each and every point. We cover this part, so I can skim through it. Yeah. How do I get to it? So I have all these points, and I'm asking what makes sense if I want to use, well, I can always use polygonal path, but if you think that you want to generate animation that from this path, there is somebody that moves across this path, well, polyline is not very nice. I want it to be smooth, and hopefully continuously smooth and hopefully geometrically smooth, that I'll define in a second. So if I have my set of points, 1, 2, 3, all the way up to n, for the last point, I will give a tangent. If I want to use a Hermite spline, I need to tell you I can always use B-spline, but please, B-spline, if you remember from last meeting, has no obligation to go through the points. B-splines, you give it your control points, and it will kind of go close to these points, like be attracted to them, but not necessarily hit them directly. Cut hole Rom will go through all the points and will be smooth, not continuously smooth, unfortunately. But and I want now to use a Hermite, so I need to feed Hermite with tangents at each point. What you see is several Hermite curves. One Hermite spline, one Hermite curve that starts at this point and here. One Hermite curve that goes from here to here, and so on. So I'm Catmull Rom guesstimate, ask you, give us the first tangent. I need to give you what is the first tangent, the first vector velocity. Sorry, that was the wrong slide. Don't crash. And by controlling the direction of this vector, I can move the beginning of the spline. Similarly, I'm going for the very last point, and I ask the user to define the direction, and the user, by doing so, control the direction that the curve starts with. What about the rest of the tangents for all the points in between? I need a curve to go through each of the points. I want it to be smooth at this point. What will I do? I'll guesstimate the tangent here to be what? This is point number 2. Ask yourself, where is point 3? Where is point 1? Both collinear. Let's direct this vector so it's aligned with the vector connecting 1, 2, 3. Again, the tangents that I'll feed to Hermit at point 2 will be something like the vector that goes from 1 to 3. What will be the vector, the tangent at 3? It will be the average of the vector that goes from, go backward 1 point, go forward 1 point. From 2 to 4, this is this vector. Right? This goes to here. What will be the normal at 4? Average, go back 1 point, go forward 1 point. Look at this direction. You divide it by half, or divide it by 2. So it will make sense, and that's how you get this curve. Right? So you don't have controls on all these intermediate vertices. Right? All these curves, all the tangents at the intermediate points follow the formula. The tangent at point I is, where is the point just after I? I want to ask for point 4. Where is 5? Look at where is the preceding point, pi minus 1. Where is 3? Shoot a vector from here to here. And oh, by the way, take its half. And then do a spline for each one of them. OK? And then people like it very well. It looks good. It's smooth. And yeah, nothing much to say about it. And the only thing that you need from the user is just to specify what are all these points. And because I want to guesstimate the velocity, the vector, the tangent at p1, but there is no p0, so I need to supply p artificial p0, and the same for the last point. There is no the next point, so it doesn't go automatically. Okay. There are multiple advantages of using splines stitching curves one after the other instead of using one polynomial that meets all the points. One of them relates to that we don't like to work with, polynomials of a high degree. We talked about it. Sometimes you want to compute the roots. Sometimes you want to ask two polynomials or two players that moves along these polynomials meet each other or not. So you need to find the roots of the difference between these two polynomials. If it's high degree, it's very inaccurate and takes lots of time. Another advantage of using stitching of low degree polynomials will be obviously by asking about locality. If I'm moving something here, or if I'm going to, do I have it open? Yeah. Here is the B-spline that we had before. B-splines. How does it work? Every point, F, for example, has this pulling or pushing force that affects the curve, but the curve has no obligation to go through this point. And once you move this parameter T1, it will show you one point on the curve, this point Q. I'll send you the updated link, this point Q. And it also shows you what are the weights that each one of the points are getting. Again, it's just linear combination of the control points, no tangents. And at this particular time, you see that the green curve corresponds to D, gets the maximum weight. And at the same time, this and this are the weights of C, previous points, and E, the next points. And F got very minuscule weight, and G gets absolutely 0. So these are the three functions that are in charge. And when you're moving to the next time slot, just you're using this same three functions. This one goes away, and a new one appears. Now, when you look at this hairy, unpleasant formula, notice that for all the points it equals 0 except of at most 4. Meaning what as a term of convex combination? First, it tells you that the whole curve is in the convex hull of all the points, obviously. But it tells you something more. It tells you that for every particular point, every particular point on the curve, there are only 4 data points that have non-zero weights. And these weights do sum up to 1, meaning that this point lives inside the convex hull, the point on the curve, live inside the convex hull of the 4 relevant points. B-spline. And I'm moving a bit with time, and then now it's different 4 points, of course. So what happened in time? C left, and instead G started to get some weights. And so on. And remember, to make it all starts at A, I need to make A appears a few times. So A should appear a few times, otherwise the curve doesn't start at A. Why do we prefer these properties of splines? Well, it's locality. You want to move one of the points you're controlling a shape that hopefully will lead you to create 3D shape, move one of the points. It affects part of the curve, but it's only controlled locally by this point G. Only participates locally in this curve, and then it's out of the game. So any change of G will not affect the beginning of the curve nor the end of the curve. So it's just the portion of the curve that G is in the game, one of the 4 important points at this place in time, and then it will be a different 4 and a different 4. Make sense? So it's nice for both Bezier and for B-splines, always convex combinations. So these properties of being inside the convex hull is important. Bilinear patches, our very, very last topic, well, almost our last topic. Bilinear patches, what are you doing in bilinear patches? You have so I want to generate a shape as a function of, I can think about it as a curve. I can think about it as a curve that changes in time. And bilinear patches are the simpler one. What is happening with the bilinear patches? Here is a bilinear patch that controls by DE. Let's see if I can rotate it properly. What happened when I move one of the vertices? Of course, this whole patch can move. What is the formula of this patch? It's function of 2 parameters, and it tells you take P0, take P01, take, that was A, B, C, D in this case. And what happened in this patch? Let's say one side of the patch you arrived when U equal 1. What happens when U equal 1? When U equal 1, this guy dies. This guy dies. And what do we have here? U equals 1. No need to write U. 1 minus VP0 plus VP1. What is this? It's a segment. Similarly, keeps the other guy as a segment, other guy as a segment, other one as a segment. And then the curve approach very nicely in space. And if you have another patch out there, then they meet each other, not in a smooth way, but at least there are no holes in the whole surface. This patch and this patch both shares two vertices, so they must share the whole segments connecting them. Last question for this course. Why do I insist on this specifying every point on this patch as parameters of this U and V? And I'll tell you U and V are between 0 and 1. Well, it's two-dimensional, so it's U and V makes sense, but do you see another applications of why this obsession?
You can move through it at a constant pace rather than.
Moving in constant space, that is definitely important. Animations. And where else did we use U and V in this course?
The texture map?
Texture mapping. It asks to place an image out of it. Use it as a billboard. Well, it's not smooth. Okay. Sorry, it's not flat, but it will just work. And you can tailor these patches one after the other. It's not the best way. You can, I mean, you'll see the edges between them, but at least it's a way that gives a way to generate these patches. And the only other bodies that we really had time to discuss in this course earlier was how we are creating surface of resolution by just using Bx and Bz. What are these? Create this curve. It can be a spline of a Hermite or a Bezier or B-spline of the others. Create this curve, rotate it around, and you have such a beautiful cup. Right? Surface of revolution. Again, how I switch from a curve into a parameter that by. So what are my parameters? U, that is the rule of t that I had of moving along the curve. And by the way, the curve is not necessarily a function, but it can happily goes back because you're controlling it by U. And what does V tells you? V is just taking this shape and cut it before, right? So if I take a plane, and cut the z-axis, it will be a circle, or possibly a few circles because the curve might comes back by then. Make sense? And yeah, and there is nothing here that really requires parts, so you have access to the slides. So just about what is a ruler surface, please study, not too much. Start with two curves. So the parameter U will tell you how you move along this curve, and then you're connecting it by segments. And why does ruler surface is cool? Because by ruler surface, you can make this bridge in Jerusalem. Right? You're connecting it by cables from this bridge to this segment and generating cables that connect them or create this shape, which is another example of ruler surface, also created by U and V. What is U? U will tell me at which angle 2 points are, not necessarily one above each other. They don't necessarily have the same angle, but I will keep them in some phase with respect, let's say 30 degrees. And V will generate a segment. Right? So depending on the angle between moving on this point, what's the difference? It might be a cylinder, if the points are just one above each other, or it can be this hourglass otherwise. We spend a lot of time on things that I thought that are quite important and cool. Other things that I thought that are important and cool, we did not speak about that I planned. We did covered animation at all. Could have gone more into programming tricks, possibly, but I don't know. I feel good in what I was trying to give, at least. It was a nice intro, and yeah, and I had time. I had fun. I thought it's, I mean, as a group, grades-wise, enthusiastic participation, it's one of, I had great time in this course, honestly. Really. Self-selection, I don't know. People liked it. Enthusiastic, other knowledge. Achievements are keep it for the final, obviously. Nobody has a safe yeah, part. But yeah, don't, I don't know. Pick textbook of, you know, coaches' speeches to the team before the game. Like, go and be the best athlete you can do in the final, and keep your heart. And there is nothing that you can that stands in your way to an A beside you. Yeah. Thank you, everybody.
Sure that Wednesday's the last day of school, so there's no class Thursday.
Correct.
I wasn't certain about that, but I thought.
I mean, don't take somebody the word of somebody with ADHD about anything. But I think that the time of the exam is correct, and I think that today is the last day of class.
Yeah, it's 8. I know that. So.
Yeah.
Let's go over it.
So for the review session on Saturday, is that only online or is that here?
Don't live too far if people want to meet. I mean, it's much more useful if we meet. So let's say if there are 3 people that want to meet, I'll be happy to meet. I leave 10 minutes from here.
And for homework 6, did you mention an extension for that?
Sure.
Also?
Yeah. I mean,
Just in general? Or is it
yeah. Whenever you need. I don't really